Hello friends, welcome to Star Explainer. Tales of Herding Gods Part 309 and 310 explains based on novel. So let's start explanation. This voice came from underground and seemed to be swiftly moving around. The voice sneered and said, "Cutting down my primordial tree, stabbing my heart with a sword, seizing my corporeal body, using it to raise a fake soul. What a pity that after primordial tree fell, it became a tree without its roots. Being born from a tree without roots, you will never become the new Mother Earth. Fake will always be fake, it will never become real." When Qin Mu heard this, he immediately slapped the dragon Chilin's head and shouted softly, "Fatty dragon, turn and run." The dragon Chilin's reaction was fast, and he immediately turned to run. The water Chilin kneeling on the ground was still holding onto the rope, and so he tumbled as he got dragged on the ground. He still didn't let go of the rope. Celestial Venerable Yu hurriedly said, "Ah Shui, run together." The water Chilin came back to his senses, and let go of the rope. Shaking his body, he transformed back into his true form and followed after the dragon Chilin. Feng Chuyan hurriedly said, "The voice below belongs to Mother Earth, why are we running? Stop, I want to deal with Qi Xiaoyu, that little slut." Just as she said that, the ground shook violently. Sorrow and grief could be heard in the laugh coming from underground. "You have no idea why I am known as Mother Earth. Mother Earth's power doesn't come from the trunk and crown that's above the surface, the power comes from the roots." The dragon Chilin, that was running furiously suddenly saw the ground under his feet splitting apart. Countless incomparably huge roots squirmed underground, and they shuttled back and forth like huge dark brown dragons. The entire Jade capital city suddenly collapsed into the ground. Numerous half-gods, gods, and devils that were still kneeling on the ground fell into the huge cracks, when they didn't manage to react in time. They were seized by those squirming roots and swallowed up, vanishing into the ground. Fire clouds grew under the dragon Chilin's souls as he carried everyone and tried his best to fly upwards. The people of the world only thought the primordial tree was huge, but they don't know that the primordial tree is only a small part above the surface. The truly huge part is the roots, the primordial roots that are 100 times larger than the primordial tree. The voice underground was becoming more and more furious. Jade Capital City had already been completely buried, and not only that, but the entire Celestial Palace was also sinking from the quakes. Flames suddenly spewed out from underground and reached straight to the clouds. Pillars of lava that were even wider than mountains swirled furiously. Feng Chuyan looked at this sight in a daze, and she only saw countless half-gods, gods, and devils flying in between these pillars. They executed all kinds of divine arts as they tried to escape out of that place. The dragon Chilin and the water Chilin's speed had reached the extreme, but the magnetism had suddenly been thrown into chaos. Their bodies became incomparably heavy, which made it hard for them to fly. In the sky, no matter if it was gods, devils, or chi cultivators, everyone was falling. This kind of falling was extremely strange. They didn't fall straight down into the ground, and instead, they were falling to where magnetism was abnormal. Some were falling up, some were falling down, and some were falling horizontally. Suddenly, a god fell beside them and landed in mid-air. With a loud smack, that god crashed onto a power magnetism divine art, and fresh blood instantly exploded out. His bones and flesh were separated, and everything was crushed into pieces. Heavy pieces sank to the bottom while light pieces floated at the top. His death was too miserable to look at. That god had clearly fallen into the air, but it was as if he had collided with the most durable iron wall. Around them, countless gods and divine arts practitioners were falling in all directions, and no one was landing on the ground. They were all crashing onto magnetism divine arts of the 5 elements, exploding into flowers formed from fresh blood. It was sad and beautiful. Qin Mu said solemnly, Sister Chirian, now you know why we need to run, right? Feng Chirian was in a daze. The voice underground belonged to Mother Earth, who only had her broken soul and heart left. However, she was controlling the most crucial body part of Mother Earth, and that was the roots of the primordial tree. Roots planted in the primordial realm were incomparably huge, and it wasn't known how far and deep they stretched. Her magic power was unimaginably dense. On the surface, under that primordial tree, the other Mother Earth possessed a corporeal body. When she executed the primordial tree, the tree that stretched to the sky glowed brightly. Sunlight washed off as the rays whirled and danced in the breeze. They attacked down into the ground. Both Mother Earths exploded with their divine arts, and Jade Capital City had long vanished. Only the storm formed by the magnetic force remained, the storm that distorted space. Qin Mu saw the situation early, and thus, he was still considered quite safe. However, he also couldn't deal with this kind of abnormally strong magnetism, so he immediately decided to activate his teleportation divine art. He swept everyone and teleported out. In the next moment, they appeared 1,000 miles away. Suddenly, magnetic force exploded under their feet, and the violent divine rays of magnetism weaved across the sky like dazzling rays of sunlight. Wherever the light passed by, strong gods, devils, and divine arts practitioners would fall uncontrollably towards the divine rays, causing their bodies to be shattered into pieces. Looking from far away, it was as if these strong existences had taken the initiative to collide into those divine rays. This was simply a massacre. Yet this was merely the aftermath of the collision between the Mother Earth above the surface and the Mother Earth below the surface, which had involved them. These two Mother Earths hadn't made a move on these gods directly. Their abilities were simply too terrifying. Each of them controlled the power of magnetism, and when they clashed, the magnetic force was so violent that disaster was brought to the people around. The divine power of magnetism was the most basic power in the world. It was the most primitive power, and also the most terrifying one. As the embodiment of this kind of power, Mother Earth's strength could no longer be measured by using realms like Numinous Sky and Emperor's Throne. There were no realms for ancient gods, there was only how strong or weak their control of the Great Tao was. Realms couldn't be used to measure their power. Qin Mu hurriedly executed his teleportation divine art repeatedly and escaped. In a few instants, he escaped over 10,000 miles. Much of his cultivation was exhausted, so he had no choice but to stop teleporting. He let the dragon Qilin sprint full speed ahead. The magnetism here was still extremely volatile, but its threat to them was greatly lessened. The dragon Qilin's cultivation was even above Qin Mu, so it was enough for him to deal with. He turned back to look and saw where both Mother Earths had clashed. He could no longer see those two terrifying existences, and could only see the divine rays from the primordial tree flying around and the countless roots that had tunneled out from underground. Other than that, there were also strong practitioners flying among the branches and roots of the two ancient gods and trying to escape. From time to time, people would be hit and explode in mid-air, turning into lumps of blood fog that expanded outwards. Those that could escape from there were all strong practitioners with extraordinary abilities. Suddenly, Feng Chirian's eyes lit up as she saw a 9-headed phoenix slicing apart thick branches and roots by plucking the strings of her zither. The zither notes would slice through the divine rays of magnetism, allowing her to break free from that battlefield. Slut Qi Xiaoyu. Feng Chirian was furious and leaped down from the dragon Qilin's head. She transformed into a fire phoenix to flap away. Sister Chirian, no. Qin Mu shouted loudly, "Come back quickly to protect me, my cultivation is almost at life and death realm." Feng Chirian's speed was extremely fast, and she vanished in the blink of an eye. Only 2 trails of colorful light were left in the sky. One was the trail left behind by Qi Xiaoyu, and the other was left behind by Feng Qiuyuan. Both of them were strong practitioners of the Phoenix race. Feng Qiuyuan's cultivation was already at the peak of numinous sky realm, while Qi Xiaoyu was on Emperor's throne realm long ago. She knew she wasn't Qi Xiaoyu's match, and thus brought the Mother Earth primordial sword along with her. Cold sweat broke out on Qin Mu's forehead, and he said softly, "Mother Earth got you to protect me." Waves of magnetic force came rolling over, and this kind of strange power distorted the ground and space. This caused mountains to move up and down like waves as they got warped. Qin Mu quickly executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and protected his own body. Numerous gods and half-gods caught up to them and escaped in all directions. From time to time, someone would get hit by the random divine rays of magnetism, and would be shrunk into a ball of flesh in the blink of an eye. Then, they exploded with a bang, turning into blood fog. Qin Mu looked behind and stared nervously at the light, getting the dragon Qilin to dodge them. Right at this moment, incomparably terrifying waves came from where both Mother Earths were fighting. The ground trembled like a piece of cloth, and the mountains moved up and down. In the center of the fight, the divine rays of magnetism were like a ball of light expanding rapidly. Wherever it passed, mountains looked like three-dimensional paintings that were stuck on the ball. That terrifying ball of light expanded at a frightening speed, and closed in on them. That kind of speed was countless times faster than the dragon Qilin's flying speed. Qin Mu felt his hair standing on end. "We can't run anymore." Are the abilities of an already dead Mother Earth, and a newly born Mother Earth from a crippled corporeal body so terrifying? "Big brother, lend me your strength." He took off the willow leaf and shouted. His body bulged continuously, as the divine power of Yudu poured over. Cryptic Yudu language rang out around his body, and it was strange and beyond comprehension. Not far away, Ancestral Dragon King and the rest, who had protected a bunch of half-gods, shouted, when they saw that they couldn't escape anymore. Work together to defend against the impact. Everyone's auras collided together, as they each executed their divine arts. Ancestral Dragon King transformed into an old dragon, with an incomparably huge corporeal body. His dragon body wrapped tightly around his clansman, and he opened his mouth to spit out a dragon bead. The dragon bead smashed straight at the divine rays of magnetism as he shouted, "Everyone attack this point together. If we create a large hole in this divine art, we still have a chance to survive, otherwise we are all going to die here." Other strong practitioners executed what they could and threw great divine arts right behind the dragon bead. Qin Mu stood up in front of the dragon and the rest to shield them. With his 6 arms moving up and down, they were like countless arms which finally formed a punch to strike forward. The ball formed from the divine rays of magnetism brought along heavy mountains to clash with their divine arts, and that ball seemed to pause for that short instant before swallowing them up. Qin Mu heard the loud explosions of mountains shattering beside his ears, and he got lifted by the immense power. He was thrown backward. He had 3 heads and 6 arms after all, so he grabbed the dragon Qilin with one hand and grabbed the water Qilin with another hand. His other arms grabbed Celestial Venerable Yu and Gongsun Yang, before he got blown away by the remnants of both Mother Earth's divine arts. Finally, after this impact, those mountains and land that got distorted finally returned back to normal. Qin Mu arched his body, as he was being pressed down by a huge mountain, and crawled up from the bottom of the mountain. Gongsun Yang, Celestial Venerable Yu, and everyone else walked out from beneath his body while trembling in fear. Qin Mu dispersed his 3-headed and 6-armed form, and shrunk back into his normal size. He felt a lingering fear as he examined the surroundings. Where his gaze could see, mountains had collapsed left and right as though a violent storm had torn through the forest. As for where Ancestral Dragon and the rest, who had worked together with them in the moment of chaos were, they had no idea. Those half-gods were the ancestors of their respective races, and they had strong abilities that were no weaker than Feng Chuyan. They were probably all right. Bad little brother, borrowing my power, costing me dearly. In Qin word land, Qin Fengqing's aura was dispirited and listless. He was slightly furious. I need to eat those ghost gods in order to recover my vitality. Qin Mu had borrowed his strength to collide with the aftereffects of both Mother Earth's divine arts. The aftereffects were too strong, and so, even the little overlord of Yudu couldn't take it. Qin Mu hurriedly stuck the willow leaf on and examined his and everyone else's bodies. He let out a sigh of relief. It's all superficial wounds, there's nothing serious. Gongsun Yang hurriedly said, let us quickly find Mother Earth. That fake Mother Earth's abilities are rather strong. I wonder if Mother Earth is fine. Qin Mu raised his head and said, we can't go back anymore. The earthly palace is probably buried deep in the primordial realm. Even if it isn't destroyed, we also can't find where it is. We can only wait for Mother Earth to come to look for us. This isn't a good place to stay long in, we need to leave as soon as possible. Fatty Dragon, can you still walk? Fatty Dragon pulled himself together, and was about to say something, when he raised his head to look at a mountain peak stabbed at an angle on the ground in front of him. He didn't say a word. Qin Mu followed the line of his sight, and saw a girl sitting on that slanted mountain peak. Her arms were hugging her knees, and she was looking at them with a smile. She was none other than the other disciple of Mother Earth. Her clothes were fresh and didn't look miserable at all. She wasn't like Qin Mu and the rest, who were all covered in dirt. It was as if those after-effects were completely insignificant to her. Qin Mu revealed a smile and said leisurely, Senior sister, we are both disciples of Mother Earth, yet I don't know how to address you. That girl stood up and said with a smile, as both disciples of Mother Earth, I've heard of Cult Master Qin's reputation for quite a long time. The reason why I've come out of seclusion this time is to see what kind of abilities you have. Qin Mu laughed loudly, and he swung his right arm outwards horizontally. With his 5 fingers spread out, his sword pellets swooshed and transformed into a flying sword in his hand. Please, I would also like to see the abilities of the Heaven Alliance that has been passed on since ancient times. Heaven Alliance. That girl burst into laughter. Cult Master Qin seems to be mistaken. My name is Yang Qiling, and I'm not from the Heaven Alliance that's riddled with rebels and traitors. Heaven Alliance that's riddled with rebels and traitors. Qin Mu was puzzled deep inside. Mother Earth once said that it was the Heaven Alliance that had killed her. Her Earth soul had escaped by hiding in the roots. Mother Earth had also revealed another piece of information, and that was that after the Heaven Alliance killed her, they chopped down her primordial tree. According to these 2 pieces of information, Qin Mu could deduce that the primordial tree had landed in Heaven Alliance's hands. The other Mother Earth could only be born from the primordial tree by a capable person in the Heaven Alliance using the fantastic technique developed from Brahma Buddha's dream entering the path. Yet this girl called Yang Qiling actually said she wasn't from the Heaven Alliance. If she wasn't from the Heaven Alliance, then the other Mother Earth wasn't bred by the Heaven Alliance, it was bred by someone else. Now, this was very strange. Could it not be the Heaven Alliance that killed Mother Earth back then? However, how would Mother Earth mistake the person that killed her? Or could it be that after the Heaven Alliance killed her, someone snatched the primordial tree from the Heaven Alliance's hands to breed another Mother Earth? Qin Mu was puzzled. Since the Heaven Alliance was able to kill Mother Earth, they definitely had extraordinary abilities. So who could be able to snatch away the primordial tree from them? However, I can search for clues from this girl named Yang Qiling. Qin Mu raised his head to look at that slanted mountain peak, and to him, as long as Yang Qiling displayed her best divine arts, she would leave behind traces, which he could use to find the mastermind behind her back. Yang Qiling walked down from the mountain and said with a smile, Cult Master Qin doesn't have to guess where I'm from. No matter how smart you are, you can never guess my roots. There's still another matter other than to see you, and that's to bring a person away. The light in Qin Mu's eyes suddenly pulled back, and he asked insipidly, bring who away? Yang Qiling's gaze suddenly moved from his face to Gongsun Yang's face, before finally shifting to Celestial Venerable Yu. Lan Yu Tian, Celestial Venerable Yu. She gave a gentle laugh. Celestial Venerable Yu has no future following you, you will only waste his talent. However, if he follows me, I can find him the best teacher, and fully open up his potential. In the future, he will definitely shine brightly. She looked very beautiful, and she had a beauty that wasn't inferior to Granny Sai and Dieyue. She was like a goddess that had fallen into the mortal world, yet Qin Mu paid no attention to her. The divine light in his eyes earlier had become reserved, and now, even his aura was starting to become reserved. The dragon Qilin twitched his dragon scales uneasily and secretly moved 2 steps back. The pet knew the master the best. The dragon Qilin knew Qin Mu very well. The more reserved Qin Mu became, the stronger his killing intent was. This beautiful-looking girl had touched Qin Mu's bottom line, and caused his desire to murder to bloom. The reserved Qin Mu was like a fierce beast that was staring at his prey. He could burst forth any time to kill. You know a lot of things. Qin Mu's tone was dry. Many things that you shouldn't know at your age. This makes me more and more curious as of where you're from. Yang Qiling raised her hands to stroke the hair coming down the side of her temple. She said with a smile, I'll defeat you and take Celestial Venerable Yu away. How is this deal? Celestial Venerable Yu isn't a commodity, he's the person I respect the most. Qin Mu's tone became increasingly harsh. Someone left him in my hands, and even without this relationship, I will never tolerate anyone who wants to treat him as a tool, to treat him as a commodity. Yang Qiling looked at him and tilted her head to think before saying, You seems to possess a huge problem. You don't seem to be just Cult Master Qin of Eternal Peace. If you are purely Cult Master Qin, you wouldn't have such feelings for Celestial Venerable Yu. Qin Mu said indifferently, Fatty dragon, take them and go further away. The dragon Qilin felt as though he was relieved of a huge burden, and hurriedly brought Gongsun Yang, Celestial Venerable Yu, and the water Qilin as far as possible. He said softly, Cult Master is angered, let us quickly leave this place so that we don't get implicated by him. Gongsun Yang asked curiously, if we attack her together and gang up on this disciple of the fake Mother Earth, wouldn't we be able to defeat her? Why do we have to leave? The dragon Qilin said softly, have you forgotten about the other women around that smiling maiden? Gongsun Yang was stunned for a moment, and only then did she come to understand. The women he was talking about were those maids beside Yang Qiling. The dragon Qilin said, the abilities of those maids are probably not inferior to Feng Qiuyuan, otherwise, how would Yang Qiling even survive all the way here? She would have long been crushed into bits and pieces by the divine arts from both Mother Earths. Those women are probably nearby. If we rush up together, how could they sit still? If we fight as a group, we are definitely no match for them. Cult Master's intention is for us to immediately leave this place and not wait for him. The water Qilin said, but he told us to go further and didn't ask us to leave. The dragon Qilin sneered and said, you don't know what Cult Master's thinking. The reason why he said that was to drop the guard of those women, so they wouldn't know we took the chance to slip away. When they realize, we will be long gone. The reason why Cult Master is doing this is actually for the safety of your master. Celestial Venerable Yu asked anxiously, in that case, would my big brother be in any danger? Of course there will be danger, but we don't have to question him. The dragon Qilin quickly said, the one in danger now is that girl, Cult Master's desire to kill has awakened. Gongsun Yang burst out in shock. That little sister just now looks so beautiful, is he capable of taking her life? The dragon Qin brought them to leave quickly as he said, in Cult Master's eyes, she isn't pretty at all, so he naturally would be able to. Gong Sun Yang said seriously, but she's really pretty, even I feel inferior myself. The dragon Qin borrowed those mountains that had fallen at all kinds of angles to hide his body. He shook his head and said, her chest is small, Cult Master doesn't think girls with small chests are pretty. Gong Sun Yang's eyes widened, and she lowered her head to look. Grabbing onto her clothes, her eyes looked a little disappointed. Under the slanted peak, Qin Mu's aura was stable and didn't leak out at all. No qi and blood leaked out either, everything was just calm. Yang Qiling's beautiful eyes blinked, and she didn't know why Qin Mu had suddenly become so ordinary. It was as if he had become an ordinary person. Suddenly, she came to a realization. Completely reserved. It's the martial Dao. Just as she thought until here, a loud explosion rang out beside her ears. Qin Mu moved 300 yards in a step and came to her face. The air in between them got compressed into physical substance, and shattered right away like glass. Behind the shattered wall of air was Qin Mu's face that was as still as an old well. He had no emotion. Yang Qiling was astonished and flipped backward gracefully. Moving diagonally into the sky, she came to the peak of that slanted mountain, and said with a smile, aren't you Mother Earth's disciple? Why are you using the divine art of the martial Dao? Just as she landed on the peak, she felt a warmth against her back. Qin Mu was already behind her, leaning against her back. He had arrived atop the peak at the same time as her. The sure kill battle technique in martial Dao. Yang Qiling gave a soft chuckle, and her magnetic divine rays burst forth to form two magnetic divine knives. Qin Mu moved with exquisite footwork, and the cold gleam of the sword in his hand twinkled as he stabbed sword after sword into empty spots. As he moved, Yang Qiling was afraid of showing her heart to him, so she moved as well, and the empty spots that Qin Mu had stabbed were precisely the next locations where she would shift her body to. Clank, clank, clank. Incomparably concentrated sounds of collision rang out as her magnetic divine knives danced up and down. Every time, she could precisely block where the sword light was coming from and force it back. The sword in Qin Mu's hand suddenly split from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 4. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into several thousand flying swords that surrounded both of them. He was like a thousand-armed god that kept changing swords, and the flying swords in the air also kept attacking Yang Qiling from different angles. The sword moves executed by each flying sword were actually different from one another. Yang Qiling swung her knives, and divine knives came flying out of her magnetic divine knives to clash with the flying swords in the air. The peak of this slanted mountaintop was only several hectares in size. The young man and young woman moved around on the peak gracefully like fluttering butterflies, while light and shadow clashed around them. Every instance was extremely dangerous. The sure kill technique of the battle technique school was unleashed to perfection by them, and even though it was dangerous, it possessed an unusual kind of beauty. Suddenly, both of their bodies separated, and Qin Mu turned around. There were no longer any flying swords in his hands, and he pressed forward with both palms. Countless runes of magnetism swirled around his palms, and magnetic divine rays burst forth. Countless runes transformed into a galaxy formed by billions of stars. The magnetic divine rays surged between each and every one of the stars, and that was Granny Sai's divine art, which was learned by him with one look. Granny Sai had used this kind of divine art to contact the crux of unsealing the primordial realm. This resulted in the huge change in heaven and earth, allowing the primordial realm to resurface. This divine art was a great divine art from Granny Sai's pursuit of the Tao of magnetism. When Qin Mu executed it, incomparably terrifying magnetic force pressed down on everything. The slanted peak suffered from unimaginable pressure, and continuously sank into the ground. Yang Qiling turned around at the same time, and said with a smile, Mother Earth's Tao 12. She pushed out with both palms as well and burst forth with a magnetism divine art. This girl was actually fighting head-on with Qin Mu. Both of them ran forward quickly and clashed together. When their palms collided, magnetism transformed into light to burst forth from their palms. With a swoosh, this slanted mountaintop was sliced off. The other half of the mountaintop, under their feet, sank furiously into the ground. Qin Mu's hair rushed into the air from his fury as he roared. Suddenly, qi and blood behind him flooded out, and it was like an ocean of blood had appeared behind him. His qi and blood were raised by 1,000 folds in that instant. Great Emperor of Martial Paths Tao 1. Yang Qiling was astonished. This woman couldn't react accordingly. Qin Mu retracted his palm, and turned it into a fist to strike her. The ocean of qi and blood behind him exploded and transformed into vitality to rush forward. Yang Qiling grunted as she flew backward. In the sky, countless apparitions of Qin Mu appeared, and immediately after, every apparition of Qin Mu attacked her with different divine arts of the martial path. Boom! On the waist of another majestic mountain, there was a human-sized hole, and a huge fist imprint appeared on top of this human-sized hole. The fist smashed into the body of the mountain, and caused it to shake several times. Qin Mu's body appeared in front of this hole, and raised a finger to press on the heart of his brows. Countless flying swords flew over and gathered into a sword pellet in front of him. Qin Mu's sword finger stabbed out, and a sword light stretching 10 miles stabbed through this hole in the mountain, shooting out from the other side. The brilliant sword light was like a light pillar that was bright to the extreme. Sword Dao's Tao 1. Yang Qiling's voice came from the other side of the mountain. Qin Mu's pupils contracted and lifted the willow leaf. His third eye opened up, and a beam of light shot out from this eye. That beam followed quickly after the sword light. At the same time, he raised his hand to throw a mudra out. Prisms of heavenly fire scuttled out in all directions to bombard Yang Qiling, who was on the other side of the mountain. Great Tao of Yudu's Tao 23, Great Tao of Xuanju's Tao 2. Among the terrifying rumbles, Yang Qiling's voice rang out clearly. Cult Master, your divine arts are really remarkable. In that case, have you seen Tao 1 before? Tao 1. Tao 2. Tao 23. Thoughts flashed past Qin Mu's head like a spark. The Tao 1 and Tao 2 that Yang Qiling had mentioned seemed to be serial numbers for all kinds of great Tao. It was extremely weird. And this kind of serial number should be corresponding to the types of great Tao, for example, Martial Tao's Tao 1, Sword Tao's Tao 1, Yudu's Tao 23, Xuanju's Tao 2. However, what puzzled Qin Mu was that Xuanju's Tao 2 was actually the great Tao of heavenly fire. It was a divine art he had constructed with the great Tao of heavenly fire. Since the great Tao of heavenly fire had turned into Tao 2 in Yang Qiling's terms, how many kinds of great Tao were there exactly? Who would serialize these divine arts of these great Tao? Yang Qiling was so young, so how did she know so much? The Tao 1 she had said just now was the Tao 1 of which great Tao then? Right at this moment, he suddenly felt an incomparably dangerous pulse from the other side of the mountain. The divine art that Yang Qiling was using was very unfamiliar to him. It was an unfamiliar great Tao, an unfamiliar divine art, and yet there was an imposing and upright atmosphere. It's not from Yudu system, it's also not from Xuanju system, and it shouldn't be Yuanju's divine art system either. Qin Mu immediately made his decision. With his index and middle fingers together, the sword pellet he had stabbed out flew back and attacked Yang Qiling, who was on the other side of the mountain. He couldn't see Yang Qiling, but he could sense her location through her breath. He moved quickly, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. When his sword fingers stabbed out, it would be stab sword form, and when his fingers flicked upwards, it would be flick sword form. When his arm didn't move, and his wrist draws a circle, it would be wave sword form. Sword finger slashing horizontally would be cleave sword form, and slashing down vertically would be hack sword form. All 17 basic sword skills were executed by him. He couldn't see Yang Qiling, but he executed every strike with utmost concentration. He was gathering all of his essence, qi, and spirit. Sword skills were his strongest abilities, and offense was the best defense. By threatening the enemy, he could force the enemy to be unable to execute the goal of using her full power. On the other side of the mountains, Yang Qiling danced gracefully to avoid sword light after sword light. Suddenly, her divine art burst forth and came bombarding through the mountain. Across the mountains, Qin Mu couldn't see what divine art she had executed. He could only feel the Tao charm that was unrivaled. He could only hear resounding Tao voices, as though there were countless ancient gods. An incomparably majestic and vast ancient celestial heavens appeared in front of his eyes. On the stars in the sky, there stood 360 star gods, 70 earthly fiend gods, 36 heavenly spirit gods, 5 element gods, a sun god, and a moon god. They formed an inescapable net. He could even faintly see a giant of light standing above the gods. That was Heaven Duke. Yet he could also sense the mountains and rivers, and the dragons and phoenixes dancing in the sky. The ancient gods stood upright, and surrounded a verdant and thick primordial spirit that supported both heaven and earth. They were gathered around an imposing goddess under the primordial tree. That was Mother Earth. And under the ground, where the darkness laid, horns of 9 bends transformed into yellow springs to flow downwards. The gigantic bull head, tiger face, and human body existence had formed Yudu. That was Earth Count. He could even see the 4 deities of the 4 directions, black tortoise, vermilion bird, green dragon, and white tiger. The most terrifying thing was that Qin Mu saw an incomparably ancient celestial heavens and a blurry emperor sitting inside the numinous sky hall, ruling over the ancient celestial heavens. His naked eye couldn't see Yang Qiling's location, and he couldn't see Yang Qiling's divine art, yet according to Yang Qiling's breath, he could sense such a terrifying and imposing sight. That was the vision of Tao being mobilized. The star gods represented the different great Tao of star force, while the sun, the moon, the 5 elements, and the 4 deities also represented different great Tao. In addition, Yuanju's Mother Earth, Xuanju's Heaven Duke, and Yudu's Earth Count also represented each of their system of great Tao. The reason why there are these visions is that Yang Qiling has included all of these great Tao into her divine art, transforming them into a complete system and fusing them into a divine art. Tao 1 isn't Yudu's Tao 1 or Xuanju's Tao 1, it's the Tao 1 of all the great Tao. Qin Mu came to realization and shifted his feet. His body shook as he revealed his 3 heads and 6 arms. Ayah! His 3 heads opened their mouths wide and roared furiously. The ribbon used to bind his hair exploded, and his hair rushed upwards. Overlord Body 3 elixir technique was raised to the extreme by him in an instant. Qin Mu was like a god, and in front of him, that huge mountain was already flaking and cracking under Yang Qiling's divine art. Huge mountain rocks were like lava that had poured out from the ground, and in the next instant, countless rocks were vibrated into powder. This huge mountain started to sink down, but not into the ground. Instead, it was because the bottom of the mountain had completely shattered and couldn't support a huge body anymore. Yet no matter how much the mountain sank, the body of the mountain was shattered into pieces by that terrifying power instantly. 1/3 of the mountain peak was gone in that split second. The power from Yang Qiling's divine art didn't seem to weaken, and it came over majestically from the other side of the mountain. With unmatched crushing momentum, it pressed down on Qin Mu. Among the dust that had saturated the sky, Qin Mu seemed to see the ancient celestial emperor stretching out his hand to smack him. The dust shrouded him, and he couldn't see anything except for the hand coming to smack him. Yang Qiling, I know your origin now. Qin Mu shouted forcefully. With his hands controlling his sword fingers changed rapidly to execute countless sword moves. At the same time, his other forearms became incomparably thick. With muscles bulging and blood vessels popping out like green dragons under his skin, he threw countless punches in an instant, and every strike was to his fullest strength. He released that terrifying power of destruction in his corporeal body to his heart's content. Return of thousand palms beyond the strange peaks of heavens. His great divine art of the martial Tao burst forth at this moment, facing the huge hand of the ancient celestial emperor head-on. Yet it was completely crushed by that unmatched power straight after. The martial Tao that martial arts' heavenly teacher had founded was completely useless against this palm that was filled with boundless celestial might. Qin Mu got blown backward, and the gate of heaven influence appeared behind him. Yudu devil chi poured furiously into the vertical eye in the heart of his brows. His third eye opened up, and the beam of light that could eradicate all corporeal bodies and souls shot out. Black marks appeared in the sky. Yet he still couldn't block down that palm. The Tao voice from Qin Mu's mouth vibrated, and his arms flailed around. Countless magnetism runes soared up to form a galaxy, which he pushed forward with his forearms. In the incomparably violent vibration, his forearms burst apart. Flesh, blood, and bones flew in all directions. He got blown away by the unmatched power and flew back at an extremely fast speed. His body got stretched thin. Qin Mu coughed up blood from his three mouths, and the forearms that had broken off grew back rapidly. He flipped his palm several times in an instant and pressed down towards the huge hand that was pressing down on him. Countless prisms of heavenly fire exploded, and in that explosion, terrifying impact poured out in all directions. The heavenly fire that came spewing out swept along the ground like a flood in a radius of several hundred miles, bathing the land of several hundred miles in blazing flames. And when the heavenly fire exploded, it raised a whirlwind which brought the flames even further and ignited the forest. The radius of 1,000 miles sank into a sea of flames. Boom! With the huge hand pressing down, Qin Mu was covered by the palm, and in that instant, Qin Mu was still executing his teleportation divine art. Countless teleportation divine arts swirled around him, but they were later destroyed by the grand celestial might. His teleportation divine art was broken right away. The huge hand swept down, and the mountains in the heavenly fire shook. The impact in the next instant was so astonishing that even the heavenly fire, that was inextinguishable, had its internal structure completely decimated. The fire extinguished completely. Catcher, catcher, the ground vibrated as gorges stretched out in all directions. It was a shocking sight. Meanwhile, the mountains separating Qin Mu and Yang Qiling had almost been completely destroyed under the power of this divine art. In the rolling clouds of dust, Yang Qiling's grunt sounded out. When the Tao one of this girl burst forth, the other two hands of Qin Mu had always been executed sword skills. From the 17th sword form to the 18th sword form, Qin Mu used a peculiar sword skill to slash into her protection circle, and the 18th sword form transformed into the 19th sword form. The second move of Calamity Sword, the 19th sword form, raising Calamity, burst forth, and Yang Qiling's body movement was sometimes like an astonished swan, a swimming dragon, and even a phoenix spreading its wings. It was truly marvelous and made others unable to determine her location. And yet, the 19th sword form was a move that Qin Mu had created to take revenge for Celestial Venerable Yu. Countless sword lights surrounded that girl and danced up and down. Every transformation was a calamity, and either she had to respond to the calamity, or she had to avoid it. Yet, the more she avoided, the more the calamity would grow. Those dancing swords had cut off all retreat, forcing her to have no choice but to respond. When her huge hand had covered Qin Mu, Yang Qiling had also executed her body movement to the extreme. She got hit by all the swords, and several thousand swords stabbed into her body at the same time. Yang Qiling was like a huge porcupine nailed in the air. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth as several flying swords had also stabbed into her mouth. Only the hilts were left outside. This girl shivered from the pain and suddenly, the flying swords dropped out from her body. The wounds on her body sealed up in case she lost too much blood. When all of the flying swords were plucked out, this girl coughed up blood, but the blood wasn't red, it was gold and even had sunlight rising from the blood. I know your origin now. Yang Qiling coughed up blood repeatedly and held onto her knees. She raised her head to look over at Qin Mu. She was gasping for breath, and beside her were flying swords that had scattered everywhere. She said with a low voice, I also know why you must protect Celestial Venerable you now. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used so much strength. Cough, cough, cough. Suddenly, violent coughings came from the air filled with dust. Yang Qiling's pupils contracted as she looked towards the sound to see a figure standing up shakily. That figure was extremely miserable. Only one arm remained from the 6, and his 3 heads were all bent at peculiar angles. Huge chunks seemed to be missing from each and every head. The chest of that figure seemed to have rotted away, and his backbone seemed to be twisted, yet he was walking step by step over to her. As that figure walked, there still seemed to be flesh falling off his body. The corners of Yang Qiling's eyes twitched. The falling flesh meant that Qin Mu had been beaten up miserably, but she still saw flesh growing on his body. He was repairing himself. Crimson Emperor Light Emperor's Tao 1. Yang Qiling straightened her back and moved back. Cult Master Qin, stop. You and I aren't enemies. Celestial Venerable, you can also continue to be under your care. We don't have to fight to the death. I already know who you are. WHRNG, WHRNG, WHRNG. The flying swords on the ground trembled, and Yang Qiling's scalp crawled. She endured the pain to move backward. Stop. Celestial Venerable Mu, it's not that I'm afraid of you. Qin Mu walked over shakily and every step was excruciating, causing his body and face to contort. Fresh blood flowed down his legs and filled his footprints with blood. Yet as he walked forward continuously, his footsteps gradually became more and more stable. Catcher, catcher. Sounds of bones displacing rang out. Qin Mu's broken neck started to reconstruct themselves, and his strangely twisted heads started to recover. His broken bones were planted and grew back out again, while the flesh on his wound squirmed to continuously grow outwards, growing out arm after arm. Flying swords on the ground also flew up one after another, slowly increasing in numbers. Yang Qiling's hair stood on ends. She had never seen a divine arts practitioner with such astonishing recovery. If it was a god skilled in the art of creation, or a half-god from some powerful race, they might still be able to just do it. Yet it was impossible for a divine arts practitioner to have such strong comprehension on the art of creation. This was literally an undying body. The great divine art she had executed earlier was enough to wipe out Qin Mu, and yet Qin Mu had relied on that perverted recovery to endure all of the pain, recovering as he walked. Yang Qiling could even see countless small runes dancing up and down his wounds, and they were like incomparably fine needle and thread weaving in and out to allow the wound on his body to grow. Dead skin was shed, dead flesh was relaced, and broken bones were ejected out. Her divine art gave Qin Mu not only injuries on the corporeal body, but also on the primordial spirit. After withstanding that move, Qin Mu's primordial spirit was all tattered, and yet Qin Mu's art of creation could also repair his primordial spirit. Crimson Light Era, has astonishing achievements in the art of creation. Crimson Emperor and Light Emperor was skilled in the primordial spirit and skilled in the corporeal body respectively, and when both of their techniques were combined, it was the highest standard in the art of creation. An undying body and an indestructible primordial spirit. Qin Mu still had a distance away from the highest standard, but he was already not far away. Yang Qiling mobilized her vital qi forcefully, and she suddenly grunted. She had several thousand wounds on her entire body, and even though she had suppressed them and forced them shut, the wounds still had yet to recover. By forcefully using her vital qi, her wounds had nearly exploded open. Moreover, she already has not much vital qi she could use. That great divine art was the great divine art of Tao 1. It had immense power, but the consumption was also terrifying. More than half of vital qi had been exhausted, and the remaining small portion still had to be used to suppress her injuries. She was slightly finding it difficult to cope. However, what made her slightly at ease was that the flying swords that had risen from the ground weren't much. It was obvious Qin Mu's exhaustion was great as well. Under the power of her great divine art, even though Qin Mu managed to protect his life, he had lost more than half of his vital qi and even more than she did. And to achieve an undying corporeal body and an indestructible primordial spirit also required an extreme amount of vital qi. Qin Mu's vital qi might not be as dense as hers now. Celestial Venerable Mu, you said you know my origin, so you should understand we don't have to fight to the death. Yang Qiling continued to move back, and she quickly took out a jade bottle. She consumed the spirit pills inside and tried her best to repair the damages to her body. I also admire Celestial Venerable Mu very much, and I know that Celestial Venerable Mu had shaken the world during that battle in Jade Pool during the ancient era. However, don't you forget who had given you the title of Celestial Venerable Mu. The title of Celestial Venerable Mu. Do I care? Qin Mu's voice suddenly exploded. When he said the first word, he was still 300 yards away from Yang Qiling, and when he said the third word, he had already come to her face. His speed was indeed inferior to before, and even though he had the art of creation of Crimson Emperor and Light Emperor, he was still heavily injured. That great divine art of Yang Qiling had caused massive damage to him, and already damaged him divine treasures. Not only that, he could even feel that the function of his corporeal body was also limited. This was because his exhaustion was too great, and even though he had the strongest art of creation from Crimson Light era, he was helpless if his cultivation couldn't catch up. However, Yang Qiling's injuries were also extremely heavy. From the first sword form to the 19th sword form, the damage that Raising Calamity Sword was the first she had experienced in her life. Qin Mu's fist smashed towards her, and that fist was tattered. There was not a piece of intact flesh, and even the white finger bones could be seen. Do I care? His voice boomed like thunder. Yang Qiling raised her hand and magnetism runes burst forth. Magnetic force instantly pressed down on Qin Mu. She couldn't use my cultivation now, and it wasn't wise to fight head-on with Qin Mu. Using magnetism divine art was her best choice. Magnetism divine art could allow Qin Mu to feel his corporeal body becoming as heavy as a mountain. Any punch and kick would be affected, and his accuracy would be affected. Even his attack would be pulled to the ground. However, what was out of her expectation was that Qin Mu had still punched over. He was not affected by the magnetic force at all. Tao 7 of Yuanju is ineffective to him. That's right, his corporeal body is too strong. My great divine art just now didn't even smack him to death. Yang Qiling was astonished, and he raised his hand to block this punch from Qin Mu. Suddenly, the other 5 fists came smashing over like a tempest. Yang Qiling blocked with all her life, yet Qin Mu's 3 heads and 6 heads overwhelmed her. She got punched 100 times and fell backward. Her wounds all opened up in mid-air, and she was like a ball that was filled with water turning into a net, leaking blood from everywhere. Yang Qiling hurriedly sealed her wounds, and Qin Mu suddenly squatted. With a leap, he raised his 6 arms high up and cupped his hands. He appeared above her. Yudu's Dao 3. Yang Qiling hurriedly executed her divine art, and a membrane of darkness opened up in front of her. Qin Mu's figure sank into that membrane of darkness, that had no thickness at all and vanished without a trace. He was sent into Yudu by her. Before Yang Qiling could even let out a sigh of relief, Qin Mu's feet appeared under that membrane of darkness, and his cupped fists smashed down ruthlessly on her chest. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Yang Qiling heard her ribs cracking, and with a loud bang, she smashed into the ground and made a huge hole. I can't go on like this, I'll be beaten to death. She laid in the pit, and she forcefully raised her remaining vital qi to blow open her own life and death divine treasure. I can't continue to suppress my cultivation. I need to break through my life and death divine treasure in order to stop him. Breaking through life and death realm, she instantly felt a kind of power that passes through life and death flooding over. This power flooded throughout her entire body, and the Berserk magic power surged to sweep away her earlier decrepitness. Even though she still hadn't recovered back to her peak, she didn't have to be scared of Qin Mu with the magic power of life and death divine treasure now. Yang Qiling was overjoyed and raised her head to see Qin Mu falling from midair. His body was horizontal to the ground, yet he was rolling furiously in midair, as though he was a top being pulled by a string as he fell. What is this move? Yang Qiling suppressed all the wounds on her body, and she suddenly came to a realization. It's a sword move. The 18th form of basic sword skills. Crap! She hurriedly retreated and jumped out the huge pit, only to see Qin Mu rolling horizontal to the ground towards her. What welcomed her was several hundred spinning and slicing flying swords. Yang Qiling crossed her hands and magnetic divine knives appeared. 2 knives took turns and blocked down the 18th sword form. Endless sounds of collision rang out. Both of them fought speed with speed, and their speed was overwhelming. Yang Qiling lost the first opportunity, and got forced back continuously. He can still use sword 18. His vital qi should be extremely weak, so how could he use a move that consumes so much vital qi? Just as she thought until here, she suddenly saw that Earth Aeon Dao fruit in the halo behind Qin Mu's head, and she understood. The energy inside Mother Earth's Earth Aeon Dao fruit is immense. He is refining the energy inside the Dao fruit into his cultivation. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped rolling and he landed on the ground on his feet. Grasping a mudra in his hand, he struck out. Xuanju's Dao 2. Yang Qiling's felt a shiver down her spine and immediately tossed the 2 magnetic divine knives in her hands. The 2 divine knives were as fast as lightning, interweaving in the air to form layers of magnetic walls to protect her. Boom! Heavenly fire burst forth, and the terrifying power destroyed walls after walls. It broke through 100 layers and finally stopped at the last layer. Yang Qiling let out a sigh of relief, and suddenly, bright knife light shone out from the last wall. With 6 arms raised up high, flying swords came soaring over. There were only several hundred flying swords, just now, and now there were over 2,000 flying swords gathered in his 6 palms. They transformed into a divine knife. Qi. The last magnetic wall was sliced apart by a knife, and Qin Mu's 6 arms opened up. That divine knife split into 6, and in front of Yang Qiling's eyes were just vertical and horizontal knife lights. Every cloud has a silver lining. Golden-colored blood spurted out, and Yang Qiling was almost diced into dozens of chunks. She hurriedly moved back and said sternly, "Celestial Venerable Mu, you don't want your title anymore." The wounds on Qin Mu's corporeal body had basically healed, and he could sprint as fast as thunder. Every time his feet landed on the ground would explode and he would leave behind a series of thunderclaps. He sneered and said, "What do I want it for? If he has the guts to, get him to take it back personally." Yang Qiling was furious. She forcefully mobilized her vital qi and let her wounds open up again. "How dare you be disrespectful, now you can't blame me." Dao 1. She forcefully executed this great divine art, and terrifying waves swept over again. The apparition of the ancient celestial heavens appeared around him. There were thousands of palaces and halls, Jade capital was deep, the city walls were high and the celestial river flowed. The apparitions of the star gods appeared to form an inescapable net. On the celestial river navy was controlling fleets. In the sky, the sun and the moon hung high up. Under the celestial heavens was Yuanju, where primordial tree and Mother Earth was gradually forming. Above the inescapable net, Xuanju and Heaven Duke were also gradually forming. Below Yuanju, Yudu and Earth Count was also gradually taking shape. At this moment, Qin Mu had already stepped into the celestial heavens and barged through southern heavenly gate. He punched through this gate and in the next instant, he stepped on the celestial river to rush straight for Jade Pool, leaping across the Jade Sea. Boom! He had already shattered the city gate of Jade capital city, and wherever he passed by, the apparitions of palaces would be shattered into pieces. Broken tiles and shattered bricks would fly in all directions. In the apparition of numinous Sky Hall, Yang Qiling was standing in front of the Emperor's throne. Qin Mu had come too fast, so fast that he didn't seem like an injured person. Before she could even complete her divine art, she already saw Qin Mu bashing his way into numinous Sky Hall. His cultivation has recovered. That's not it, he has entered life and death realm. Yang Qiling felt her hair standing on ends. Numinous Sky Hall suddenly trembled as Qin Mu's fist smashed the apparition of this supreme and sacred hall into pieces. In the next instant, his fist pressed down on Yang Qiling's beautiful face and immense power burst forth. Both of their figures flashed through the ancient celestial heavens that were in destruction. A mountain dozens of miles away suddenly exploded and rocks flew in all directions. The flying rocks curved in midair and landed after a long time. Next, a deafening boom rang out, and only then did the apparition of the ancient celestial heavens vanished. Yang Qiling's body kept transforming as she tumbled on the ground, crushing countless trees and rocks. She only stopped after sliding dozens of miles, laying on the spot motionlessly. A foot without shoes appeared beside her and another foot came landing down. Qin Mu stood in front of her. "I don't care about the title of Celestial Venerable Mu that old man Celestial Emperor had conferred on me." Qin Mu spat out a mouth of bloody phlegm. "I've fought for the title of Celestial Venerable Mu with my own fists. It isn't conferred by old man Celestial Emperor." Mouthful of gold blood flowed out of Yang Qiling's mouth as she looked at him with lifeless eyes. Qin Mu raised one of his arms that was still regenerating and spread his 5 fingers apart. Sounds of swords came breaking through the air. Flying swords suddenly landed in his hands and the sounds of collision rang out endlessly. The other flying swords collided with this flying sword and they started to fuse. The speed was so fast that only after images could be seen. Qin Mu pointed the tip of the sword downwards and lifted up Yang Qiling's chin. He raised a hand to wipe off the blood from the corner of her lips and asked with a smirk, "Where's Celestial Venerable Yu?" Yang Qiling swallowed the blood in her mouth and croaked, "Bring them up." "Cult Master, we are here," the Dragon Qiling's shivering voice rang out. Qin Mu looked towards the source of the voice, and he saw those women that were following Yang Qiling escorting Celestial Venerable Yu, Gong Sun Yang and the rest over. The Dragon Qiling hung his head down dejectedly. "Cult Master, we didn't manage to get far before we were caught." "I know." Qin Mu said indifferently, "You guys were to lure them away, and only then would it be easy for me to seize this girl in return for you guys. This is to lure the tigers away from the mountain. The dragon Qin was dumbfounded and cried out, Cult Master, you mean your intention wasn't to attract the attention of these women, and let us escape first? Qin Mu was astonished and he scratched his head. He then replied with a curious coincidence, That's right, Fatty Dragon, that was my intention. You have understood well, Aeon, very good. Part 209 and 210 end here. Thank you for watching.